Jeffrey Walker, you are the director of Dance Academy, the movie. And it seems, at one time or another, you have also been the director of every major TV drama made in Australia in the last 15 years. I've got to say, mate, just to start off the interview in a slightly unusual way, and I do want to return to your career in a few moments after we talk about the film specifically. But in preparation for an interview, one always goes to the IMDb page of the person you're going to interview. And that usually takes a couple of seconds. In your case, it took about 10 minutes. Mate, this looks like an enormous amount of TV work, both as a director and as an actor. Are you able, just in a nutshell, to tell us what the story is behind such a prolificacy?
Well, I have to say, I have had a very unusual life, to be completely frank, because I started acting when I was 7 years old, and I acted in different television series for 10 years. And then about a year after I think a year after I finished high school, I started with a production company training as a director, and then I started directing television shows and have been doing that for about 14 years. So I don't know anything else, even though I sort of feel like I feel closer to 50 than I do 30, but I just started very young and I haven't stopped, and I have such an insatiable appetite for this film business, and I just love it so much that and I've been so fortunate to be able to work on so many different things. I just haven't wanted to take the foot off the gas.
Now, you worked on Dance Academy, the TV series, for about 8 episodes. Is that right?
I did. I was there for their very first episode, and then part of that first season, which was wonderful.
Well, I'm very, very keen to know, given that TV requires a pretty quick turnaround, as opposed to film, where even on low-budget films you have a little bit more time and the rhythm is different. What was the main difference between making Dance Academy, the TV series, and Dance Academy, the film? Was there a different rhythm to making the film?
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, we have more days to shoot on a feature than you certainly do in television. But also, I mean, that series, I think it was 2009 or something. I feel like, I've just developed so much personally, I'd say, and just in terms of, how I would view my approach to, directing a piece has improved and all that kind of stuff since then. So in terms of approaching this, I think I probably had a maturity, that I didn't necessarily have then to this storytelling and understanding truly how to, tap into the themes of this film. I think that being able to have more time when you're shooting allows you to explore a little more, being really clear on how the photographic style informs the storytelling, the performance tone and the subtlety and nuance of that versus, the bigger performance moments you can afford yourself. I mean, all these things, I guess, come with time, and also that you can, film provides you an opportunity to, be a bit bold with your choices, which sometimes in television you want to not homogenize it from episode to episode, but there certainly has to be a consistency, whereas film, with these wonderful designers that I work with, the costume designer Schofield and Chris Kennedy, production designer, they helped me so much in just being able to say that, in a feature you can be bold and make a choice, and that choice will be lasting with the audience. And so, yeah, it was quite a big journey, I have to say, to comprehend all of that and make that transition from television to film, but I was thrilled to have the extremely elite team that I was fortunate to work with to help me in that process.
Can you give us an example of this boldness that you're talking about?
Well, I think it's things like, like just being able to say, well, what is the, if we're doing, let's say we have in the film a very big ensemble performance by who's, effectively the National Ballet Company, which we use the Melbourne Ballet Company, who are absolutely fabulous, and we had them, on stage in silver firm tutus and masks, and it was kind of like there was a big cog in the machine theme to the entire performance piece, and then the way that we shot it was kind of, we were on stage and handheld and right up into the lead character Tara's psychology as she was performing, and took her out of that into a nightmare sequence of her remembering how she'd broken her back, which is the main driver in the film. So those sort of things, and that can also mean that, in that nightmare space, it can be a wild storm, she can be drowning underwater, it's all of those sort of choices that you just sort of want to go there as opposed to sort of be tentative and throw the audience in there, and also not to completely explain every moment as it happens and let them really feel it a bit more in sum at the end of the film. And I think those are the things that helped me, make that step to really say, well, we can't let this feel like another episode of the television television show. It has to be deserve its spot at the cinema and deserve the audience coming along and spending the money to see it at the theatre.
And you're able to get better, deeper performances from your cast as well?
I'd like to think so. I think that there's the blessing of the format of film as opposed to television is that you know every single scene that you're about to perform before you perform it. In television, they can, I just read episode 15 yesterday and suddenly my character does this or that. It's very hard for an actor. They're not sure, how far to commit to something. Is this me at my saddest, or are you going to do something even, harder for me in the next episode that I haven't read yet? In film, we spent a long time into the cast to really chat about, not rehearse it as such and get up and move it around and, those sort of rehearsals, much more just philosophically talking about, who these characters were, where they were at this stage of their life, and therefore being able to say, well, at this moment, this scene, this is pure heartbreak for you, or this is the most exciting moment of your character's life in the context of this film. So I think, therefore, they're given a greater ability to be able to truly channel something special.
I'd like to ask you a question that I asked David Caesar, who did the Nowhere Boys movie, and that is that when you're doing a movie offshoot of a very successful TV series, how much of the job is really respecting the conventions and the dictates dramatically of the TV show? Given what you've said, there must be a sense of these are the limits within I must work.
Well, that's an interesting one with this one, because I felt like, because I didn't watch the show and then come and work on it as a director, I felt an odd sense of ownership, over the film, in a sense that, that I remember facing all of the questions when you start something up of, what is this show and how does it look and how does it feel and what's the tone and where do the performances live and all of that sort of thing. And I know that, like, the biggest thing that I said to the team, and they felt exactly the same way in terms of, the producer and writer, was that this can't be an extension of the show. It has to be, it can have all of the characters and all of the history, and that we need to sort of start again here, and that's a visual start again, and how we approach the dance sequences, and, we need to really take this thing, to the next level. I didn't feel a pressure to adhere to everything that had gone in the series, but I felt an enormous pressure, to make sure that Sam Strauss, this is such a personal and account of, her own life and her own personal journey, that the pressure was actually on to just make sure that it hit the beats that, were important to her in the script. And I think that my inherent knowledge of, what Dance Academy means to its fans and, to me as a director were sort of already there, because I, felt so comfortable working on the show all those years ago. But I was also very happy to say, we're starting again on this, and this character needs to work in the context of this film. It doesn't matter that there's been an episode in the second season that says this or that. It's completely inconsequential, is that they can have this wonderful history. The fans can get off on the fact that we know, they know so much about each of these characters. But to me, they had to each have their aria, in a sense. They needed to, have their arc and something for me to be able to say this is their feature film journey. And I didn't, and even though there's wonderful ties back to the series, I did my very best, at least, to try to make it feel like it was a standalone piece.
So they weren't really sort of pulling the reins on you? You felt quite comfortable contributing ideas and changing things?
There was, Jo Werner is extremely supportive as a producer, and she understood that, to be completely frank, that, she knows that television is a producer's medium and film is a director's medium. So when she knew that I understood the film, this was way before we started, and that we'd spoken at, real lengths about what the film is and what it's about, then there were no conversations about it has to look like this. It was, there was no pressure on how I would visually tell the story, the tone of the performances, how much humour there needed to be versus, how much emotion. It was all, I was really left, to succeed or fail, and I knew that ultimately as a director, there's nowhere to hide in a film like there is in television, and that I'd have to really believe in each of those choices, and Jo knew that if she'd tried to enforce any choices on me, I probably wouldn't have been able to deliver upon them because they're not my own taste. So I didn't feel any pressure whatsoever in that regard, except that I wanted to do a fantastic job for Jo, Sam, and of course, the fans who had been looking forward to seeing this for so long. So it was a truly exciting, exhilarating, and liberating experience, and one that, as a television director, that's a big step to take because you're so used to having so many, constraints that you work within to make that show consistent. So, making this a film and really treating it as a film as opposed to a television narrative was wonderful.
Slightly tongue-in-cheek, you mentioned TV as being a producer's medium and film being a director's medium. What about the poor writer? What's their medium?
Well, there you go. It's a very good point. Well, I'd like to say that writers have governance over all, because without them, neither medium exists. So I think that, I'm such a, I'm so in awe of writers. I'm not a writer myself, but, I've had long, collaborations with writers like Andrew Knight, and certainly here with Sam Strauss, but they, I'm sure if you ask them, they'd say, we want a bigger piece of it all. I think in the States right now that's happening. So, but, in terms of, my bosses, I get hired by the, producer in television, and they work very closely with the writer and then farm it out to me. In a film sense, I made sure that Sam was around for the entire pre-production, because I just needed it every day, so I lean very heavily on my writers, and then when I start shooting, I'm happy to run with all of that, but until that time, it's, the collaboration is the thing that, I enjoy the most. But yes, you'd be right in saying that where's the full writer factor in all of that?
Jeffrey, I'd like to ask you just some broader questions, both about your career and about some observations that you may have about the industries in America and in Australia. But first, in accordance with my interviewing policy, I do want to just offer you a criticism I had of the film, Dance Academy, the movie. I did enjoy the fact that it is a self-contained film. That is, that you can just go in cold and see a full-blooded, self-contained narrative. So I enjoyed that element. Something I've got to say, though, was I did lose a lot of interest in the film when the film itself lost interest in its most interesting character, which is the young lady who kind of sells out and goes to New York and enjoys all of this success, but at an artistic cost. And I felt that when your main character coupled up with that character, that should have or could have formed the core of the narrative from that point on, with everything springing off that. Yet she continues on her journey, and that character kind of gets sidelined, and I felt that she was the most interesting thing in the film. I felt that she was the most interesting thing.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, please go. It's a wonderful character, because it really sets up that opposition between integrity and compromise, between success and self-fulfillment. And there was a really strong tension that had been set up between the friends, and then the main character moves on, and the New York character, the fairy character, kind of gets sidelined. And I was a bit sorry about that, because I thought she was the most interesting thing in the film.
Oh, well, it's good to hear that she was interesting in the film too, because I think you're right, because in terms of the weighting of the film, we often spoke about the fact that it's a bit like, the Wizard of Oz story, that, Tara has this wonderful thing at home, leaves it to go and have this big adventure, meets all these people along the way who are offering her friendship, kindness, guidance, acceptance, all of these things. And anytime any of them challenge her, she just says, I can't hear it, I've got to move on and do something else, So you're certainly right that, she comes into the film, and just when you feel like she's going to have a big impact, Tara can't handle being actually told what's happening in her life, and she runs away from it, and then there's a sort of a rift that needs to be mended and, and comes back. But and I think that probably also that given that it's an ensemble piece, it's, there's always going to be, I think, or not always, certainly it could have been approached differently, but I think that the nature of it is going to be that she's going to invest time in each of these characters, and I'm sure that there'll be fans, particularly of the show, who will wish that their favourite characters got a bit more real estate in the film, and from your point of view, recognising that was a character that could have had greater influence over Tara on the film is probably something that our audience will feel the same. But yeah, we wanted to explore that journey and explore her time with each of those characters, and yeah, so I'm sure that in another version of the film she could have factored more heavily.
In the director's version.
There you go. The director's cut will be just yours, and it'll be a good 20 minutes longer. I have more cats. Yesterday, even I have to say, on the red carpet yesterday of the premiere, that the second that that actress walks onto the crowd, or the teenagers screaming and shouting. So, and I'm sure having heard that too, Jim, I'm sure I'll be sitting there going, boy, maybe we should have had her more in the picture there. So I'm sure you're not too far off the truth.
Listen, congratulations on your modesty, but despite what you say, at your age, you have accumulated a formidable list of high-quality credits. Some of them are genuinely remarkable. The fact that you helmed Angry Boys, for instance, is a singular achievement, as well as your work in America on Modern Family and The Bitch in Apartment 23. You work across Neighbours and many other Australian shows. Broad question, mate. Are you a journeyman director, or is all this work heading towards something?
Well, thank you firstly for all that. And I think, look, for me, any time I've ever tried to predict even about a year or two in advance of where, if you try to sit there and say, what's your career going to be and where are you going to go with it and what's the end game, I've been wrong. So, and sometimes I've done it, in a geography. I just said, I want to go and work in America. I think that's when I'll know if I've made it or whatever. And then I was over there for, a couple of years working and got offered a fantastic project, back in Australia, and went over to the UK as well with it. And then I go back over to the States. So really, honestly, I have to say that it's the cliche of sort of living in the moment is a true one, in that I'm very fortunate that I get sent a few things. I don't get sent a heap of things. I get sent a few things, and I try and choose whatever the most interesting of those is at that time. And there's been, I think, inherently when I make those decisions, there's a progression. So I guess my dream would be that I've got this film coming out, another film coming out in a few months. Called Ali's Wedding, and as a director, whichever way you look at whose medium it is, I'm still at the behest of finding that right, that producer or that script or that package that will entertain me being its director. So, the best thing that may happen is that I'm offered an elevated level of projects that keep me doing things that are really interesting. And I certainly don't have any dreams of global domination or running a studio or anything like that. But I really love direction so much, and I'm hoping that that I can continue doing it for forever.
Are you consciously wanting to do more movies?
I think it's such a wonderful format, because it's you get one inclusive story from start to finish, to tell. So I'd be thrilled to. I mean, they're incredibly slow and hard to get funded and everything, films by comparison to television. When I work in the television world, they call you up and here are the dates and it starts then and away you go, So, I'm attached to other films that are in development, but it really doesn't occupy a huge amount of my time until they say, listen, we've got the money together and away we go. So I'd love to make more films and see that as the trajectory. But I also, love I think it keeps you pretty sharp as a director too to get to work in television, because you get the wonderful joy of going on to multiple shows a year and experiencing new things. But if more films come along and come my way, I'd be very,